Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Tuesday, November 11th, 2025. Professor Glenn Diesen from the University of South Norway joins us now, one of our regular guests. Professor Diesen, welcome here. Professor Diesen's happy because today's the last day of class, a 4-hour exam. I'm sure the students are crammed a lot. You crammed a lot in there for them, but welcome here, Professor Diesen. Always a pleasure. Before we talk about who is stealing Russian assets in European banks, is there any reaction in Europe that you're able to discern to the American buildup of warships off the coast of Venezuela?
No, there doesn't seem to be any concern at all. It's a bit strange, but I think a key priority would have been to see this being a win for the political West, perhaps. Indeed, at least I interpret the Nobel Peace Prize towards this end. That is, I think the Europeans would be more comfortable if the US framed this attack on Venezuela through the prism of liberal democratic values, as been the tradition for the past 30 years, because then it would be seen as something that will solidify the political West.
Instead, over here, nobody really believes the president when he says he wants to rid Venezuela of President Maduro, either because he cheated in an election or because he's a drug dealer. I mean, the president's own Drug Enforcement Administration and FDI have debunked that. Is this an issue in Europe? Do they really believe he is going to invade Venezuela to further Western democratic values or to open up the oil fields to American oil companies?
I think most people understand this about oil, but Trump himself has been quite open about this. He has made interviews where he has stood on stage, made speeches about how he was close to getting all that Venezuelan oil, how great it is to that it can fuel the American economy. So why should this massive economy this massive resource-based economy be cooperating with opponents such as Russia and China? And also, if you have this massive access to Venezuelan energy, it would be very close to the United States. It would be just in its own backyard. So he's made all these comments over and over again why oil is the main incentive for going into Venezuela. So it becomes a bit silly almost to argue that it's about narco-terrorism. But again, this is why I think the Europeans would have liked if he went with this idea that the peace is created by democracy and the US military should bring democracy to the world. I think if he would commit to that narrative, it would be seen as bolstering the collective image of the political West. So, but instead, again, he's gone with narco-terrorism as a justification.
Let me suggest, before we jump to the other topics, let me suggest a far-fetched scenario. The United States attacks Venezuela, and Venezuela sinks one of the United States warships, and the United States invokes Article 5 of NATO. I mean, is the British Navy going to come down there to help the Americans? Are British troops going to go into the jungles of Venezuela and get slaughtered like in Vietnam?
Well, I think probably the United States would want to take care of this on its own. I'm not sure what the Europeans are supposed to assist with. I mean, Europe has exhausted itself to a large extent. Also, the last weapons are being sent off to Ukraine. So I'm not quite sure what the Europeans will be able to come up with. But I think overall, the main key concern across European capitals is not just that we're losing a war against the Russians, but it's what it represents. It's the decline of the collective hegemony of the West. So I think if the US can see some Venezuelan assets, deprive this from China and Russia, and use this to build up the political West, then I think they would see this as a collective victory. But again, they've been quite. There's been very little comments upon, what would be most likely a very disastrous war.
Is this even covered in the European mainstream media? I mean, 4 more warships, including the USS Gerald R. Ford, named after the late President Ford, which is the largest aircraft carrier in the world, just arrived there. Does the European press cover this at all, or is this just, the Monroe Doctrine? We don't really care. It's just between the North Americans and the Latin Americans.
Well, it's very descriptive. Usually, they're just describing what American military assets are being moved around, and but usually it's unusual because usually the the European media is quite normative in its rhetoric. That is how it thinks the world should be. But you don't see much of this when it comes to Venezuela. But again, this is a common thing at the moment, though, to look the other way.
Okay. Has there been any reaction in Europe to President Trump's meeting in the White House yesterday with the president of Syria, the former head and hand chopper of his adversaries, the former Al-Qaeda and ISIS leader, now wearing Western-style clothing and trimming his beard and claiming he's a good guy?
And playing basketball with the intelligence services. Yeah, no, it's quite unique. But no, I think much like Venezuela on the allying with this Al Qaeda leader, Europeans are very much on board with the Americans. It's the same narrative that he's reformed because he's shaved himself and he's wearing Western clothing now. So it's an opportunity, his rule, to create a more stable Syria. And of course, there's some self-interest because many European countries have been overwhelmed by refugees, Germany for one, and many see this as an opportunity to begin to send back some of these refugees, which, given our economic problems and social fragmentation, it's a good idea to begin to deport some of the refugees. And the logic is that the source of all problems in Syria was simply Assad, because he was a very bad man who attacked his own people. Now that the country has been liberated by Al-Qaeda, then it's free for all these Syrian refugees to go back home. So I think given that there's an impulse to support the United States in this, to extend the collective influence of the West and also get rid of the refugees, that essentially, they're playing along with this idea that Jolani is reformed. He's not chopping off heads anymore. It was just, his old background.
But he is killing Alawites and Christians, is he not? Or not personally anymore, but allowing them to be killed by his militias.
Oh, he is. And this is why it was an interesting approach by the European Union when some of these ethnic minorities were being massacred. The EU, they complained about Assad loyalists attacking the government. So they essentially blamed the victim, the people being massacred. The EU blamed them for their own killing. So it's, again, a narrative has been chosen. The Europeans will go along with Jolani, and again, the Germans especially have been somewhat open about the foreign policy benefits as well. That is, the former government was quite aligned with Russia. This new one is more hostile. So you've seen the European Union as well trying to put pressure on Jolani to sever ties with the Russians, expel their naval bases from Syrian territory. So everything.
They can try. I mean, Jolani was just in Moscow 2 weeks ago, and now he's in Washington. So who knows what side he's on? Here's his reaction when my former colleague at Fox News asked him about 9/11, cut number 11.
Do you, Mr. President, have regrets that Al-Qaeda carried out those attacks that killed 3,000 Americans?
I was only 19 years old, so I was a very young person, and it didn't have any decision-making power at that time, and I don't have anything to do with it. And Al-Qaeda was not present right then in my area. So you're speaking to the wrong person about this subject.
That was Jillian Turner, who worked in the George W. Bush State Department, asking him that question. I was 19 years old. I had nothing to do with it, and you're asking the wrong person. Okay. Here's another question put to him. Not yesterday, not the day before. He's a little younger. We don't even know who the questioner is, but we can understand the answer. It's pretty quick. Cut number 13.
What did you think and feel on 9/11 at the time?
Anyone who lived in the Islamic or Arab world at the time who tells you he wasn't happy about it would be lying.
There you go. That man was in the Oval Office yesterday. Litigation over 9/11 is still going on a couple of blocks from where I am now in New York City. The defendants are, ready for this? The government of Saudi Arabia. And the court and an appellate court are both allowing this case to go to a jury. So I don't know where this is going to end up. I don't know what this guy's loyalties are. He meets with Putin one day, meets with Trump the next. He doesn't want to answer about 9/11. He says all Arabs were happy.
Well, he did have the opportunity, though, to denounce what happened on September 11.
Correct, and he didn't take either opportunity.
He did not. Instead, well, he has to keep his credibility. He's not actually severed from this same thinking and the ideology of Al-Qaeda. This is an alliance now between not just the U.S. but much of the political West and Jolani's, who is, again, former leader of Al-Qaeda. So he's not going to denounce his own people. And again, the European media has tried to push this idea that we're going to get Jolani to join an anti-ISIS coalition, and it is going to turn on his own. But again, as we see in these interviews, he has the opportunity to denounce it. He doesn't, and he recognizes as well that he claims that everyone in the Arab world, Islamic world, was celebrating September 11, and that I assume includes him as well. So he doesn't even want to distance himself from this attack. And I've seen pictures of him as well when he attended the UN, where he takes a picture next to the New York skyline, 24 years after September 11. But again, this is all the whitewashing in the world. It's not going to change the fact that this is who we now have allied ourselves with. And it's all principles have gone up the window. If you're a jihadist or neo-Nazi, we will ally with anyone these days, it seems.
How bad off is the Ukrainian military as we speak, and how aggressive has their, you can't even go to conscription because conscription is a legal draft. How aggressive is their impressment? I'll use the old British word, seizing young men and forcing them to join the military against their will.
I think it's become much more aggressive, and to the point where it's difficult to look the other way. And this is a problem for the West because, again, we have been pursuing this proxy war against Russia for the past 11 plus years under the guise of helping Ukraine. And what we now see is this very, very aggressive efforts to drag any Ukrainian man out of their homes or off the street, to the point where most Ukrainians are either fleeing the country or they're going into hiding. And just for some examples, over the past week now, we see, well, first of all, you had this British newspaper. They came to, I think it was the Telegraph, or the Sun, they went to Ukraine, and suddenly their Ukrainian driver was snatched to be sent to the army in front of them. And they thought this was quite dramatic. They thought Western journalists would at least have their interpreters and drivers safe, but they're not. And we then saw Angelina Jolie come down. She had a bodyguard or a driver who was Ukrainian, and they snatched him as well in front of her. And so everyone is grabbed these days. And this is not sustainable because it fuels further social discontent. So it will destabilize further, but it's quite aggressive. And if you watch the videos also on the Ukrainian Telegram, you can't help but to feel some of the horror and helplessness and some of the desperation for their people.
Chris, do we have, I know we had it, but maybe you don't have it lined up, the young man in the back of a van in a military uniform crying that he doesn't want to be sent to the front lines? Okay, we don't have that anymore. It's quite emotional to watch it. What are the schemes being floated in Europe now, Professor Diesen, to steal Russian government financial deposits in European banks?
Well, it's growing. The main two things that prevents us from prolonging this war, and that's the main objective, to prolong the war, is the lack of manpower. But Zelensky is trying to take care of this. But the second is the money. It's Ukraine. The Ukrainian economy is now subsidized to a large extent by the Europeans. Also, the weapons have to be bought and paid for as well. It's getting more expensive, also because the US isn't giving weapons. Europeans have to buy the weapons. So, and as you know, the European economies aren't doing very well. They're stagnating, they're deindustrializing, they don't have access to cheap energy anymore. So what can you do? And the solution seems to be to go and steal the Russian assets, at least use the Russian sovereign assets as a guarantee for a loan, which will be given to Ukraine, but Ukraine will not pay this back. So then it will go out of the Russian sovereign fund. So it's a way of trying to legalize theft by pretending it's legal. But again, the reason why it's very difficult to make it go through is exactly for this reason, that it's not legal. And there's a massive concern across European capitals that they will be held up in litigation, they will be sued. The trust in Euroclear and the European financial system will collapse. So we would like for someone else to take the fall. For example, if the Belgians would do it, as these are the ones who's hosting or who have the Euroclear. It's a Belgian-based security depository. So if they can take the blame, that would be grand. But
who's the prime minister that gave a rather eloquent, almost Jeffersonian speech about why it's wrong to steal other people's property?
Yeah, that was the Belgian prime minister, because he knows that if you steal the Russian assets, not only will the Belgian Euroclear suffer greatly, well, no one will trust it ever again, but also it's the Belgians who will be held up and sued and held by the Russians. So they don't want to take this problem on their own shoulders. But they kind of kept the door open a little bit, that if the rest of the Europeans want to share in the risk taking, then they might be able to do it. But the idea that the Belgians should go down with the ship, they're not too happy about.
Do you know if Trump has signed off on the seizure of these bank deposits? I mean, it's not American banks, I know that, but I would think that the people that are going to authorize this would like to be able to say, if true, that the American president is behind them.
Well, I think Trump would support the Europeans taking the money. I don't think the US would steal the funds, though, because the US is still pragmatic. It realizes that this would make it a pariah in the international financial system. So, but no, sure, if the Europeans want to, I think they are happy for the Europeans to do this. But no, it's you can't really overstate what a horrible mistake this would be. But it looks like it could be difficult to actually push it through. But there's other plans. It appears that the Norwegians, because the Norwegians have a massive sovereign fund, that they will maybe put up their own money as a guarantee for a loan. So there are alternatives being pursued, but something has to be done, because Ukraine is going bankrupt. It can't fight anymore, and we don't have the money.
So what is the purpose of a sovereign fund? I mean, it's got to be for a domestic catastrophe or an attack domestically. I mean, why would you pledge a sovereign fund? Why would a government pledge a sovereign fund to a known bankrupt? a person that can't pay back the debt.
Well, as I follow the media here, most of it is, again, everyone's been captured by the anti-Russian hysteria. Everyone's talking as if it's a serious proposition that once Ukraine's fallen, the Russians will march on Poland. But it's also a way of buying influence and into the European Union. That is, the Norwegians are outside of the EU. The idea is if they pledge this money, then they will buy a lot of goodwill within the economic bloc. And I see it as politicians being very generous with other people's money, to be honest. But there's panic in the air, and this is true across all the European capitals. We see what's happening. The front lines are collapsing. Ukraine is bankrupt. The lights are going off now across Ukraine. It's
Right.
we were looking at an endgame, so everyone's looking at how to rescue the situation.
And winter is coming. Here's Trump on this yesterday. I think it's in the Oval Office, but it is yesterday. Chris, cut number 10.
Look at the damage that Russia, Ukraine has done to us as a country. I mean, we spent $350 billion. We're not spending any money anymore. Now they pay us through NATO. You know, I got NATO to go from 2% to 5%. Well, that's very important. When you're president, you really sort of have to watch over the world because you're going to be dragged into it. Otherwise, you're going to be dragged into a world war. I think if I weren't president, first of all, it was president. And if I weren't president, that war could have led to World War III. It won't. It's not going to anymore. But when I first got in, I said, wow, this situation could lead to World War III. And I got NATO together. I got everybody together.
I guess he forgot that he told the American public that he would end the war in 24 hours when he was running for office in 2024. And I guess he forgot that he, and he alone, armed Ukraine to the teeth in his first term in office. And he says the war would never have happened if he were president. I don't know what he's talking about. Do you?
No, it's just a talking point. I mean, it's a good way of manipulating the human mind. It confuses what is known with what is real. So if you keep repeating over and over again that the war would never happen if I was president, then people will start to buy into it. Again, it is quite possible. I don't think he would have escalated it to the point that was done in 2021. But you're very correct. I mean, Obama, he recognized that it would not be a good idea to the logistics that the Russians had escalation dominance on their own borders. And furthermore, given that the Russians is more important for them, and again, this is an existential thing for the Russian, they will take it all the way. So they want it more, and they have the benefit of proximity. Thus, they have escalation dominance. So they understand. Obama seem to understand this, but this is kind of, he doesn't necessarily see that it's conflicted with his mission for peace, because he always does the carrot and the whip. That is, he goes to all these leaders, form this great personal relationship, say that they're all best friends, and at the same time he's pushing this maximum pressure. And but again, the javelins did lead to the escalation, which did lead to the war. So the way he excuses himself completely, I don't think it's a very accurate depiction of what has actually happened.
Professor Diesen, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Good luck grading all those exams, but we'll be seeing you long before they're due. We'll look forward to seeing you next week. It's really a pleasure to get your insight. Nothing seems to excite you. You're always very mellow and very careful and very articulate and very well grounded, and it's deeply appreciated. All the best, my friend.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome. Coming up at 2 o'clock this afternoon, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, and he's not mellow, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.